Now, for this episode, you're just going to have to walk with us for a while because this is one of the craziest concepts we've ever had. So bear with us. But strangest things, flash forward. We got a working title for this one. Just bear with us. The byword begins now. Welcome into another all-inclusive episode of the Nerd Byword. We thank you so much for joining us. This episode, the concept is a doozy. So we were postulating, and this is Dave's baby, so he'll be able to explain this further. But we were kind of sitting and wondering what a Stranger Things-esque type of show would look like if it was nostalgic for, instead of the 1980s, the 2020s. So that's what we're working with. But first, something we're very familiar with, and we do every episode.
Nerd news!
Dave, I couldn't believe this headline when I saw it.
Yeah, so it's no secret that I'm a big fan of the Spider-Man adjacent character Silk, which was, of course, created by Dan Slott and Humberto Ramos. I want to point out that the initial version of the character introduced by Dan Slott is probably not my favorite interpretation. I think the character has come a real long way. But essentially, the character is Cindy Moon, a individual who was bitten by the same spider as Spider-Man, and then was whisked away and locked up in a bunker in order to protect her. And then when she emerges from the bunker years later, she has basically the same powers as Spider-Man, and she's trying to figure out what happened to her family while she was locked up in this bunker. A really interesting character that has been very well executed in a couple of solo series now at this point, and I was really excited when the decision was made that over on Amazon Prime they were going to produce a television series called Silk Spider Society as part of this massive Sony is just trying to milk every Spider-Man adjacent character ever. If there was a character that I felt would make a really good lead for a TV show like this, it's definitely Silk. So out of all the stuff coming out of this Sony-verse, Silk probably had me the most excited. So now, fast forward to now, and what we have is a TV show that has been cancelled. In fact, Amazon announced that it is giving the green light to Noir, a Spider-Man Noir live-action TV show starring Nicolas Cage, who, of course, voices the character in the Spider-Verse animated movies. And instead of moving forward with Silk as well, that has now been cancelled. The show has been in the works for several years now and has apparently gone through at least 3 different versions according to Deadline.com. And it's been bouncing around quite a bit, different scripts and the like. Apparently, this latest version was supposed to have a lead writer that was involved in The Walking Dead initially. In the Walking Dead TV show, and her pitch was well received, and then it just kind of became quiet for a little while, and now suddenly it is gone. Apparently, there's a couple different things that are rumored. One of those is that it's just these genre IP projects, as they're being called by Deadline here, are very pricey. And they had to kind of make a decision whether they wanted to allocate their funds between a Nicolas Cage starring Noir or Silk, and they ended up going with the project that has the higher profile individual attached to it. But there's also, very interestingly, according to Deadline, one of the requests that executives had of the show is that it be reconfigured so it is not, quote-unquote, hanging so heavily on the central character of Silk, which is a mind-blowing statement. But I guess I shouldn't be too surprised, especially because Sony is trying to make a career out of making movies about Spider-Man that don't hang on the central character of Spider-Man somehow. So I guess that's just their wheelhouse these days. I find this news incredibly disappointing. I had hopes that this could actually be something worthwhile. It's a really underappreciated character, even in the comic books at this point. An additional exposure would have been nice. Obviously, the character, spoiler alert for those of you who have not played the most recent Spider-Man game, the character also gets introduced at the end of the most recent Spider-Man video game, so there's talk that she might pop up as a playable character in a Spider-Man 3 video game. So raising that profile for the character would be really good, I think, in the long run. But it's just really sad that this show didn't make it. And if the rumors are true, and the show didn't make it because they had too much Silk in their Silk TV show, it just goes to show how absolutely weird Hollywood continues to be when it comes to comic book based projects, especially at Sony, Chris.
Whoa, that's a lot to unpack. I'm kind of conflicted on this. I enjoy the character. Um, Her initial um introduction in the comics, the less said about that, and Dan Slott's fetishization of the pheromone thing, the less said of that, the better. But the other times that she has popped up in comics, I've greatly enjoyed the character. I love her costume. It's a cool kind of um, unique kind of take on a spider persona. It's unique to her character, so it's super cool. Um, but I'm kind of two minds with this. Number one, I'm surprised because Amazon in particular has a pretty high hit rate when it comes to shows. I've been greatly enjoying Fallout, which is a pleasant surprise. You've got things that even if they're not my cup of tea, like The Boys or Invincible, are widely have great followings. So it's surprising to see a studio like that that's been pretty successful to come out with something kind of that makes your head scratch like that. Um, but at the same time, if it is Sony kind of at the helm, that's par for the course for them of just completely misunderstanding the assignment outside of the animated universe. Um, for those of you who are interested, the only thing that could ever stop our show from being published, Madam Web is now streaming on Netflix. um, the the only thing that was bad enough to break our spirit. But yeah, so this is a really strange situation, and maybe our girl Cindy dodged a webbed bullet for this one. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard telling. You know, just to swerve back over to Madam Web for a second, I sometimes feel like we should just record an episode that is basically a Rifftrax version of our
Yes, that'd be
commentary
great.
on Silk, because that show remains probably the funniest, unintentionally funniest things I've ever watched in my life. My God. I still can't believe that this movie is actually number one streaming on Netflix right now. Like, it is like, who is watching this is my question. Like, we watched it because we're going to do a podcast about it, but like, not everybody's doing a podcast about Madam Web. Like, who's watching this, guys? Come on, let's have a little bit better taste at this point.
It's funny that you invoke the name of Rifftrax. More on that in Nerd Commendations.
Oh, foreshadowing! I love it. All right, Chris. Yeah, talking about shadows, dude. I'm gonna tell you right now, your news story is deeply troubling to me once again, and I'm very, very much not looking
Oh,
forward to
well,
discussing
it's
this.
not the actual like news itself, it's the reaction to said news because let's keep it a book. Assassin's Creed Shadows was announced this past week with a trailer and a synopsis, and I couldn't be more hyped. Y'all know my love for this franchise, for historical fiction, for playing around in the margins of history. The game, which is going to be released on the 15th of November, is set in feudal Japan and features two lead characters. Important to remember the number of lead characters. Um, Yasuke and Naoe. Naoe is a fictional character, a Japanese woman. Her father in the game is real life historical figure and shinobi Fujibayashi Nagato. Yasuke is a historical figure believed to have been of African origin who was a samurai during the 16th century. He's widely considered to be the first ever foreigner to be granted warrior status in Japan and was the inspiration for the Netflix anime series of the same name. However, that does not stop um, white people white gamer fans from being completely unhinged and butthurt about the inclusion of a black character in a game set in feudal Japan. Um, Unfortunately, they forgot to have this energy when Nio 2 was released a few years back, where a white Englishman was in the role, completely fictional, in the role of a samurai. So, but yeah, it has been utter chaos online with some of the dumbest things that have ever been posted on Al Gore's internet. Um, just completely dumb. However, I do fully appreciate actual historians and actual Japanese people who are dunking on these idiots. So that has been the greatest thing. With all of that nonsense aside, I am so excited for this game. This is exactly what I needed from this franchise. Assassin's Creed Mirage was a nice little amuse-bouche. It was very scaled down in size. It was very singular. They did not have the extended DLC and stuff. The stuff that we're going to get with this game, actual seasons, like, dude, the seasons are going to change. You're going to have to change your gameplay strategy in winter versus fall versus summer. Uh, it's crazy, and I couldn't be more hyped for this game, and all the haters can cry.
All the haters can cry. I love that. Let them cry. Yeah, man. So this is the weirdest thing to me that I think I may have ever seen. I don't
Yeah.
understand the issue here. So a lot of people are crowing about historical accuracy, and I'm like, this is a historical fiction video game series, and we're literally looking at a character that is the first time ever in the series based on an actual person.
Mm-hmm.
So what? Why are we crying about historical accuracy here? And I'm saying this as a trained historian. Okay, I hold a degree in history and political science, so this is my wheelhouse. And let me just say that you're not gonna get a 100% historical accuracy in any video game or television show or movie. Period. That just doesn't really exist. If you want historical accuracy, watch a documentary or pick up a well-researched book on a particular time period in history. But everything that you consume that is based on history that has fiction next to it is in some way fictionalized. And
In the name. It's in the name. Do
Assassin's
you
Creed in
understand
particular.
words?
No, they don't. And Assassin's Creed in particular has never been about historical accuracy. Okay, there
What do
has
you
never
mean
been
futuristic aliens did not throw their technology around in the form of apples of Eden to help win the Revolutionary War? What do you mean that's not historically accurate?
And let's not talk even about the whole concept of the animus and the whole syncing up with his, bloodlines and genetic memory and dude, if you want accuracy, the scientific accuracy alone of the series is absolute dog crap, okay? This stuff is not a thing. So why are you getting all bent out of shape here? And I think it's really weird. There was even one of the developers from CD Projekt Red on Twix was weighing in on this and saying the concerns about the game are certainly valid. And I'm like, dude, what are you smoking?
Let's ask the white Polish man who created an incredibly white centric game franchise like The Witcher, which I love, but yes, let's ask his opinion.
And really, what it comes down to there is very simple. They're not exactly bathing in historical accuracy over there either. That's a fantasy series, right? So I don't really understand this argument. It seems I have never. This is going to sound odd, okay? But I've never seen an entire community, in particular. Now we're talking about the gaming community, being afraid of people of color. Like
Hmm.
this is almost like borderline phobia. Oh no, I can't play as a black character. Like, what are you talking about? One of my favorite things to do when I play video games is to play as female characters. You know, if I have a choice, I usually pick the female one. Why? Well, because I grew up in a family filled with strong, powerful women, and that seems like a natural thing for me. If I want to, play a character that kicks butt, it's usually a woman. So I don't need the characters in a video game to look exactly like me, or to sound exactly like me, or anything like that, or have the same background as me. In fact, one of the big things that is fun about fiction and about gaming in particular is that you're role playing. You're somebody or something different. So get over yourself just because there's a character in a video game that has a different skin pigmentation as you. It's just the height of silliness. Jeez.
If by that measure, I should delete the current Baldur's Gate 3 save that I have, the campaign that I've spent 76 hours on, because my protagonist is a black woman who's an elf, so I certainly can't play as that.
Yeah, really. Are we just now gonna like get rid of all the games where you play as a fantasy race or you play as an alien or something? Well, you can't do that. Can't play as Superman in a video game because you're not Kryptonian. Hey, you can't play as Batman because you're not a billionaire. Like this
Hey,
is this.
cancel all those Star Wars games. You're not a Jedi.
Yeah, the Force isn't real. Where's the historical accuracy? Like this, it's the height of silliness to me. Like I don't get this whole controversy at all.
I get it. But it's only when black people or people of color at large are involved. That's it, and that's all.
Does anybody remember the early 2000s? Because guess what? I do. And in the early 2000s, we got a Tom Cruise movie called The Last Samurai, where the last samurai is
It's okay
literally
then.
a cracker.
It's
And
okay then.
nobody complained. Nobody complained that Tom Cruise is the last samurai. That's fine. Like, it's just unbelievable to me.
Um, but I will say that having actual historians and actual Japanese people dunk on the sad boy idiots is most pleasing to me.
Yeah, that's actually kind of fun, I have to say. And it's shocking how many people from Japan have taken to social media and been like, "What's your problem? This is kind of cool." Like I actually really like that. There's a sense of like, "What are you talking about? This isn't a problem." It's always it's weird when people are offended on behalf of other people. Like, oh well, it's not cool because the guy's not Japanese, and the Japanese are
The
like,
actual Japanese
fine by
people.
me. They're like,
Well,
fine
here
by me.
I think the best tweet I saw was congratulations to Naue. Um, I'm forgetting the female character's name. But she must be really like the best stealth character in the game because people are completely forgetting that she exists in this game. Like, why do you not have a Japanese protagonist? They do. It's just a woman, and you guys have trouble with them as well. All right, that wraps up very, very animated nerd news segment. When we come back from this, Dave is going to explain this masterminded project of his. Welcome back to the main segment of our show. We like to call it our byword. And in today's episode, Dave had a big idea, and so we're going to let him explain it before we get into it.
The Byword has always maintained that, to paraphrase a old skit from Chappelle's show, nostalgia is one heck of a drug. And so it kind of got me thinking a little bit about, the last season of Stranger Things being on the horizon and how 80s nostalgia has kind of been a real force in pop culture in recent years, but that seems to be kind of fading away now, right? Like the 80s nostalgia is slowly fading out. And I'm waiting for the next wave of nostalgia, which will likely be 90s nostalgia. And I thought to myself, how weird, how cyclical nostalgia is. At some point, we're going to be in the 2060s or something, and people are going to be nostalgic for the 2020s, and we're going to get some kind of TV show like More Stranger Things or Strangest Things, and it's going to be a show that is all about nostalgia for the 2020s. And because my mind works in really weird ways, the first place it went was, well, I wonder what would be included in a show like that. If we actually were making a nostalgic TV show that is nostalgic for the 2020s, what are the big cultural moments, the big products, or the big ideas that have dominated the 2020s so far that would be included in that kind of show? So we each came up with three things that we think are going to stand the test of time, and in some way, shape, or form, people will get nostalgic for, or it's going to be something just because it's a towering moment or something that will just have to be included in a TV show that is nostalgic for the 2020s. And so I'm going to throw this to Chris for the first that he thinks will be definitely a factor in a Strangest Things 2020 edition. So, Chris, what have you got?
It's funny how the universe aligns things because my kids just finished up a field trip this past week to Washington D.C. and it was making me think of the first time that I went. I flew alone for a leadership conference my sophomore or junior, I can't remember, either my sophomore or junior year of high school, and I remember reading on the plane. And this was 2004, 2005, a Stephen King novel, my first Stephen King, called Cell. I believe it's Cell. Is that the name of it? Where
It's Cell.
where everyone is obsessed with their cell phones, and um, it's funny to think back that time and the cell phones that we had in '04 and '05, our little flip phones with the phone screens that were the size of perhaps a graham cracker, if that, maybe a saltine. But it's just funny to think of that idea already being in set, and it was obviously in science fiction way before that. But I think the first thing that you have to um, include in something that would be nostalgic for the 2020s is the entire population being terminally online. um, I just went to a family event last week and everybody had their face in their phones. No one was really talking to one another. Um, it was a bit odd to kind of put my phone down and just kind of observe that almost from like a bird's eye view. And it's I think it seeps through almost every facet of society. I can't speak for other countries, but definitely American society is how terminally online everyone is. Meme culture, trend culture, TikTok dances. Um, there's so much. The internet permeates so much of our livelihood right now in our workplace. It's how we get work done. Um, it's the first place my mind went.
And I think that absolutely would be a factor in this kind of television series, because if you look at something like Stranger Things, one of the big points of that particular show is the nostalgia of not being constantly connected, right?
Hmm.
That becomes really a part of the storytelling, that they're not able to communicate over vast distances instantly because not everybody has a cell phone in their pocket. In the first season, a character goes missing and they can't exactly check find my phone to see where he's at. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So I think that storytelling today already has to be built very differently because of the constant online nature. And I think Hollywood sometimes likes to take like little cheat moments where they do stuff like, oh, there's no reception in this area, which I always think is cute. Oh, you miss the old way of storytelling. That's not really an inventive way to deal with that. But I think, if we're in a future place looking back at this time period, that this was sort of the moment where connectivity shifted, I think is going to definitely be a factor in storytelling. Absolutely.
It's funny because I've never seen Stranger Things. I'm kind of contrarian by nature, and being a '90s kid, I was born in '88, so I'm not really nostalgic for '80s culture. But there are certain films and series that I've seen from the '80s, and one thing that permeates from that decade for me, and even into the '90s, is how outside people were, and kids in particular, and how different that is now. Just everybody would you would just go play at the. I had a great setup as a kid. The townhouse the townhouse complex that I was a part of had a park at the very top of the hill, so like I was rarely inside. Um, so I was always playing, riding my bike, and so it's interesting to see how when I moved to where I live now, it's like there's not even sidewalks for people to ride bicycles anymore. Like that's not a foundational thing in building cities to have major bike trails. Maybe I'm ignorant of them, but it's certainly not as big and is where I lived previously. But that's the most striking thing is when I'm thinking back to 80s and 90s media, how kids were outside, and that was just like one of the central storytelling points of kind of getting lost out there and finding your way back home. I think of something like Homeward Bound with the dogs, where they find their way
Yeah,
back home because you leave home and you find it way back. We're not really leaving home, you know. So that's a marked difference.
absolutely it is.
Right. This is probably the easiest layup. Dave, what is the first thing that would show up in a nostalgia program for the 20s?
I don't think you're going to be able to discuss this particular era in history, especially the early 2020s, without dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, with lockdowns, with work from home. I think all of those things are just too large of a cultural factor. And I think even now that we're sort of in the mid 2020s, and things have changed somewhat and returned to a state of quote unquote normalcy, I think there are still a lot of long term effects of that particular time period. Especially, you see that in education a lot with how, kids and their attitudes towards schooling has changed
Hmm.
because of that extended time where they were basically stuck at home. So I find that, for one, really, really interesting. But I also, and this is this is gonna sound really weird, I'm already seeing, for some reason, already nostalgia for the lockdown period online. I mean, I think there is a contingent of people who already are kind of missing being able to be at home, and to work from home and to be away from people because, well, I mean, not everybody is a social butterfly, and there are plenty
They're
of
so
people who
real
feel
for
like
that, to be honest.
yeah, people kind of suck, right? And so it is not horribly surprising to me that there are people who are like, other people suck, and I kind of miss being able to
Listen,
have a good excuse to not have to put up with them.
if you know that I truly care for you, if I'm willing to leave the house and actually meet you outside of the house, so that's a true mark of friendship for me.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, especially since, yeah, I have some introverted tendencies, anyways, there's a part of me that sometimes misses not having to deal with people every day in person. So I can at least somewhat understand that. I also think, though, that a lot of people are kind of ignoring or downplaying the bad parts of that
Hmm.
time period, and there was a lot of really bad parts in that time period. If we're going to be completely honest for a
Yeah.
second. So ultimately, I think there is enough nostalgia in the air, so to speak, already for lockdown, work from home, being able to stay away from other people, that absolutely there is going to be COVID looked at through nostalgic lens in a TV show like that, particularly the lockdown element, the element of, hey, I don't have to go into work, I can work from home, that sort of stuff. I think there's going to be a sizable portion of the population that is going to look back on that part of the pandemic, at least, with some fondness. And I think the pandemic was also a pop culture moment in some ways, because we were all sort of, many of us were forced to stick around at home, and there was not a lot of human contact. You saw a real boost in the rise of like video conferencing tools.
Hmm.
Animal Crossing became a real moment for people for some
Oh,
reason,
biggest
right?
waste of $50 ever in gaming history. I'm still
And
pissed about that.
and and then of course Tiger King, which everybody
Oh
watched and
god.
was talking about there for a moment during the lockdown, right? So because of COVID, there were real pop culture moments that emerged too, and I think any show that kind of trades in nostalgia for the 2020s is going to have to reckon with that.
Um, this is going to make me feel old, and it's going to cause my back pain to flare up. But I think that COVID and the subsequent lockdown was this generation's 9/11. 9/11 was such a cultural shift, at least for American society. You probably have better perspective for the global aspects of that, but I think everything that the ripple effects of 9/11 were so serious, and I think that's the same situation with that we have here with COVID.
I think that's fair. I think this is definitely a generational moment for people, if that makes sense. I definitely think this is the this generation's day that will live in infamy,
Yeah,
basically.
I think similarly to the way that 9/11 kind of exposed some of the flaws in American hubris. Um, I think the lockdown and COVID did a lot of those same things. It showed the flaws that we have in the healthcare system, in those infrastructures and health insurance, and it kind of exposed some of the ugliness of the underbelly of American society.
I think that is probably fair. Alrighty, Chris, that brings us to your second thing that would have to be absolutely present in any kind of nostalgic television show about the 2020s.
Well, look no further than my news story from today. It would have to be the tribalism and endless debates and like the permutation of politics into nearly everything, for good and for bad. I think there are certain segments of the population that have become um, more actively aware of things that are happening. But I think everything from superhero costume designs to cinematic lighting, um, is the embers or sparks or catalysts for some of the ugliest debates that you'll ever see. And so I think that's something that would have to show up in a show that's nostalgic for the 2020s, how we just argue about everything and anything at all.
Do you think that there is going to be a contingent of people who will feel nostalgic for that kind of polarization, like that they enjoy that level of discourse?
I don't know that they'll be nostalgic for it, but I think you'd be hard pressed to tell the story of this decade without it being present.
I think that's absolutely fair. And I think any TV show almost will feature like some character on their phone or on their computer yelling at somebody else's opinion or something.
Hmm.
I don't think you're going to be able to avoid that.
It's
I
even if it's
wonder.
like a even if it's like a cut scene or a transition into something more um plot driven, like it's got to be there.
Yeah, I think that part would basically be. Um, I think it would basically be like the new Coke in Stranger Things. Like it's not a big part of the plot, but it is definitely there in the background to remind people of
Let's
of
okay,
the feel of the time period.
let's call a spade a spade. One of our characters is going to have a Snyder cut t-shirt, like
Absolutely, there'll be a Snyder Cut shirt. The Snyder Bros will be represented in any nostalgic TV show, if only to make fun of them like Barbie did. God, I love that
they'll
that
have
li-
assistant producer in their bio.
that line in Barbie where the female characters, the Barbies, are all brainwashed and they come out of it, and one of them says, "I don't know, for some reason I really cared very strongly about the Snyder Cut." This is so
And
good.
that's a
It's a great line.
self-owned by WB, which is even more. Oh, and speaking of, I'll see that and raise you the Harley Quinn cold open.
Oh God, yes. Oh, that is great. Oh man.
Dave, I'm very we've punfully intended danced around this, but I'm excited to lean fully into it for your second point.
I think that you will be very hard pressed to tell the story of this time period without referencing TikTok in some way. I think, especially among the younger generation, I think TikTok is a real towering influence, and I think you and I, in particular, working with young people, see this on a daily basis,
Yeah.
right? From the things that they talk about, the challenges that come through. It's like every time there's a new TikTok challenge, we basically have to go on lockdown as
Hmm.
middle school teachers because something bad will probably happen with some kid doing something they really don't need to be doing. And there's been so many like challenges and
Let's just
and, and
pause. I
stuff
want to
like that
pause.
coming.
I want to pause for a moment and explain to our listeners that the soap dispensers in our school's bathrooms are on the outside of those bathrooms because of a TikTok challenge. They are no longer allowed to have soap dispensers.
Yeah, because they kept ripping them off the wall and trying to steal them. It got so bad at one point a student actually tried to steal a whole toilet out of the bathroom. Like they brought tools and tried to uninstall a toilet out of a bathroom. I don't know what they thought they were going to do once they got it unhooked. It's not exactly something that you can just hide in your book bag or something, but there was an intentional working on a toilet as an effort to try to steal the toilet out of a bathroom in
I
middle
miss
school.
so much being on the bottom floor of our building.
And it's interesting too because there's a lot of stuff going on now legally speaking.
Hmm.
As of recording, there was a bill passed that ByteDance, the company that owns TikTok, is supposed to divest from the company, or I think within 180 days of the bill being signed into law, the app will be effectively banned in the United States. And I think if you keep that in mind, if we actually reach a point where TikTok is quote unquote banned, right, then I think there will be in the current younger generation a significant nostalgia for the days when we could get on TikTok and watch a 60-second
I'd love
video and do
to.
all these cool challenges, right?
I'd love to
And
run a
so,
VPN company if that's the case.
yeah, really. So I really think that if it in fact does get banned by the end of the year or something, that will further boost
Hmm.
the nostalgia for the
Of
app,
course.
for the challenges, for that kind of short content, the way the algorithm works, like the whole shebang. Because there are other companies that provide short content. You have I think Reels is what they're called on Facebook, and YouTube has YouTube Shorts now. But none of these alternatives have really penetrated the zeitgeist of youth culture in particular as TikTok has. And so, if it actually does in fact go away, it's already this huge towering influence on young people. If it would in fact go away, I think we're going to see significant nostalgia for that very, very quickly. And that would totally have to be included then in a Strangest Things 2020 edition show.
I think the only thing that you mentioned that rivals anything close to TikTok is YouTube. I if I had a dollar for every time I've had to close a kid's YouTube tab via our programming, I could retire now. But it's. I would also throw in, and I almost made it one of my points, but I will include it in this brain rot of TikTok is Fortnite. So like that'll probably be a central element of whatever they play Dungeons and Dragons and Stranger Things, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that would just be replaced with Fortnite because um, middle school males in particular, you cannot communicate to them unless you are injecting some kind of Fortnite reference. Like their brains just don't comprehend it. So I kind of group YouTube, TikTok, and Fortnite all together as like this collective instrument of
Insanity?
instrument of extreme brain rot amongst the youth population. And
Yeah,
I think that those three in particular would have to be present in this show.
I think that's probably fair, yeah. All right, Chris, that brings us to your third and final element that you would expect to see in a show that is nostalgic for this time period.
I think a lot of our points are interconnected and interspersed because of the sheer nature of it, but the celebrity obsession and stan culture, whether those are fictional characters or real life celebrities, I think that would have to be uh, present in a show like this. Um, for God's sake, the existence of Taylor Swift will sway the opinions of so many for whatever reason that I truly do not understand. But celebrity obsession, you could tie this in with Instagram and TikTok and the terminally online influences in the show. But there is just so much obsession with celebrities, good and bad, that it would have to be in a show like this.
I sometimes wonder if by the end of the 2020s we see a shift in that. I kind of feel like there's been massive celebrity obsession, particularly with people like, let's say a Taylor Swift, right? But at the same time, it seems a little bit like different than it used to be. Like I feel like the general culture used to care a lot more about like what celebrities had to say, and I think now it oftentimes feels more like they're just generally obsessed with the weird crap celebrities do, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot more. I don't know. It feels like the feel of the obsession is different. I guess I feel like it's transforming, and I think even what is a celebrity in a lot of ways is transforming. The students that we have will oftentimes, bring up individuals that I have no idea are supposed to be famous, and they're
Hmm.
usually people who are like social media famous or TikTok famous, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about here. So I think the what constitutes celebrity and what exactly they are obsessed with, I think, has kind of changed, and I do wonder where that shift is ultimately gonna land. I feel like there's definitely some kind of development, some kind of change happening there.
That's interesting because I think a lot of this is purely based on social media. Like the rise in celebrity obsessed culture comes from celebrities having Instagram accounts or TikTok accounts. And I'm wondering if there's truth to what you're speculating here. Is the population at large just going to get bored with that, of knowing what Lady Gaga ate for breakfast? Like, are we going to ever, or is the population at large ever going to tire of that, or are we just going to continue on this bullet train towards whatever?
Yeah, I definitely feel like that, like content wise, things are shifting somehow. Maybe that's just me. I don't know.
All right, Dave. So you went super meta here. In fact, I had to look up the definition of your terminology here. So I'm going to give you the floor for your final point.
Yeah. So just to be clear, I'm not talking about farming here, okay?
Listen, as a Midwestern
But
boy, I was like, why is he talking about corn?
yeah. So so the term I'm throwing around here is monoculture, which I think everybody that listens to a pod like this is smart enough to know that mono here means one, right? And so the idea of monoculture is just
Or a
that there
kissing
is,
disease.
or kissing disease. What have you been doing, Chris? No,
Baby.
so here's the thing, right? I think if you look to the past, particularly when we're looking at stuff that's like 80s nostalgia based, for example, you see the reflection of a monoculture, right? There are these cultural moments that pretty much everybody in some way, shape, or form participates in. And that is because culture, pop culture in particular, was delivered to everybody sort of in the same way, right? If you wanted to watch a TV show, you got to see it at the same time as everybody else once a week
Hmm.
on TV, period, right? If there was a big movie, you went to the movie theater to see it, period, right? And that was it. And I think, if there was a big hit song, it was on the radio, period, right? So everybody listens to the radio, that's where they get their music from. But I think monoculture is really, in many ways, on the way out. That doesn't mean that there aren't like big, massive hits of movies, for example, that almost everybody wants to watch, or big TV shows that everybody wants to watch. But I think that culture has become much more personalized in this day and age. Everybody is sort of in their own little niche or bubble, right? I have never been able, thanks to the rise of the internet, I've never been able in my life to talk to so many like-minded people when it comes to comic book fandom,
Hmm.
right? So like minds sort of flock together and carve out their own little space of pop culture. TV, we oftentimes now say we're living in like a golden age of TV. There's an oversaturation of television shows because there's so many different platforms and so many different producers all making TV shows, right? And so even if you have a breakout hit like a Stranger Things, you people consume that so differently. What about all the people that aren't subscribed to Netflix? What about
The
people who
fact
just
that I've
complete?
actively avoided watching it.
Yeah, you've not seen it at all, right? That sort of thing would not occur very often in a monoculture where everybody's basically participating in the same culture. And I think what we have now, particularly I think in the United States, is we have not one monoculture, but we have a whole bunch of smaller subcultures. Although there's overlap sometimes, I don't think everybody participates necessarily in one big overall culture anymore. Culture has become much more segmented, much more fractured. Music is a really good example of that. I don't think radio is nearly as big of a thing anymore as it used to be as far as music delivery.
Not
Streaming
not with
services
not with
are,
not with Spotify and Apple Music. No,
yeah, yeah.
YouTube,
So streaming
YouTube as
services are
well.
much Yeah, so streaming services are much bigger, right? But that also means that because you're not being exposed to the music of a monoculture, you can tailor your music experience very narrowly to your own likes, right? And I think that's kind of the real hallmark of 2020's culture. It's customization. But that also means along with that customization comes a certain amount of isolation, I think, right?
Hmm.
Because we're not all participating in the same culture. We're more separate now, I think, than we were, let's say, 40 years ago. And I think any show that deals with culture of this time period is, in fact, going to struggle more in creating a nostalgic TV show about this time than they do about something like the 1980s or even the 1990s because they don't really have a monoculture to fall back on, right? You're going to have to bring a lot of different writers together to discuss what were the highlights of your
Right.
life, what was your culture life during this time, what was your cultural life during this time. And I would even go so far as to say, and this was sort of my ending point of this thought exercise as I was kind of thinking about this. I don't think creating a nostalgic TV show about this time period is going to be particularly easy
I agree.
because of the
I
lack of
agree.
monoculture. And there are a lot of people that even say the 2020s are so boring. There's nothing that really rises to the top and everybody agrees on. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. It's not necessarily that the 2020s are boring, though. It's that I think in large part, thanks to the spread of the internet, of social media, of streaming services for movies and television and even music, I think we have basically abandoned a shared cultural experience. And so, yeah, I think the death of monoculture is really going to eventually be sort of the linchpin of the 2020s. This is where it started. Monoculture basically went away. And that, I think, would have to be a linchpin of any show that is nostalgic for the 2020s. Everybody's basically making their own culture now.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's funny that you say that because one of the ways that I find out about new music is TikTok. Um, if a song is trending, like even like a throwback song will get popular if people use it as a sound on TikTok. To the point, but that's even catered to your previously determined algorithm, though. So songs that I find via TikTok might not be the same songs that you would find via TikTok, or our students would find, or our relatives would find, because it's based solely on the previous videos you liked, whatever goes into the algorithm, what have you. Case in point, we had an in school dance a couple of weeks ago, and sixth grade girls were begging for Bone Thugs and Harmony, Thuggish Ruggish Bone, because they heard it on TikTok. And I'm like, I haven't seen Bone Thugs pop up on my TikTok. I know Bone Thugs because I grew up in the 90s, but I don't remember Thuggish Ruggish Bone being on my TikTok feed. But so that's case in point to your claim here is everybody's finding their own. It's like a choose your own adventure story as we navigate pop culture, and so our experiences are going to be different, and that therein lies the trouble of creating a collective kind of nostalgia basis for this show.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
All right, that wraps up our Byword Big Talk for Strangest Things, a decade, a show that would be nostalgic for the decade of the 2020s. What did we miss? What elements should be included in this show? Hit us up on social media at Nerd Byword or individually that Nerd Dave and that Nerd Chris. When we come back from this, our final break, we're going to nerd commend some wonderful things for you to enjoy. Welcome back to our final segment where we recommend the good stuff to you so you can enjoy it just like we do. We call it Commendations. Dave, so your nerd commendation comes with some feelings you revealed to me yesterday.
Yeah, so I'm back in the saddle for Doctor Who, and I cannot believe that it's finally back. It's a great jumping on point, I think, and I'm very very excited to actually be watching a Doctor Who season again. You and I have talked a lot about Doctor Who and how we trying to get you to watch it. It's basically my hill that I'm dying on, kind of like you with X-Men, I think. And I always, ever since I first encountered Doctor Who, I absolutely loved how weird and how out there it is, and how imaginative, and that it doesn't shy away from just getting really odd. It's sort of my all-time favorite in that regard, I think. Just unbridled, unstoppable imagination. And so, having a new Doctor again is always a great jumping on point. I'd fallen off the show a little bit for a little while. I'm now back on the wagon, and I finally watched the first episode of the new season. And though some things have changed, very much so because Disney is now involved in the production of Doctor Who and is pumping some extra money into the production, so the effects are, let's say, of a little bit of a higher quality than they used to be. Which is not a trick at all overall, because the production values have always been pretty low, right? Which is not exactly a drawback for me, because I don't mind that. So the new series actually looks really really good. But watching the first episode, which revolved around, not a joke, space babies, just reminded me, A, how absolutely gloriously weird this show is, B, how absolutely incredibly imaginative it still is, and C, that Russell T Davies is back writing the show as head writer, because, you and I have talked about like the grosser elements before of like those initial Ninth Doctor stories that you tried to watch. Yeah, that's back. That's back. We have a snot monster in this episode. The gross stuff is back. And there's a fart joke, absolutely, right at the end. You can't avoid it. But despite all of that, it just feels very Doctor Who. It clicks. And I think in large part it clicks because of the absolute blow-me-away chemistry of the new Doctor, Ncuti Gatwa, and his companion, Millie Gibson. I think there is just really great chemistry between those two. I absolutely adore how they play off of each other, and Gatwa in particular is such a great Doctor. It got that great manic energy that the Doctor's supposed to have. Represents that big heart that the Doctor's supposed to have really well. The only thing that is really, really odd to me after all this time of watching the Doctor, especially going back and watching the old stuff, is how absolutely attractive Gatwa's Doctor is. Like, snazzy dresser, very hot guy. And I'm very used to the Doctor being weird and eccentric. Hot was not usually something I would say the Doctor was very often. Gatwa is probably the best looking Doctor we've ever had. And it's almost distracting. Like it's almost like it's almost like, I really like the story about the space babies, but why is this guy so hot? Like, it's just really almost distracting from the story to watch him on screen. but without joking, I'm just very very pleased about this kind of almost return to form for the Doctor. Is just the charisma that oozes off the screen, that the absolute joy, the weird, even the sense of humor. It's all there. And so I've only watched the first episode. There's two more that have been released so far. Probably my favorite showrunner of new Doctor Who over the last few years was Stephen Moffat, and apparently he actually came back to write the third episode, and I'm very very excited to check that out because he's probably one of my top three all time favorite Doctor Who writers. And I'm very interested to see how he writes Gatwa's version of the Doctor. But it's absolutely a joy to behold. It's on Disney Plus. If you like really weird out there sci-fi, this is the show for you. Check it out.
Yeah, I'm so excited that there's like new life injected into this fandom who I've been like a casual observer of the like from the sidelines. So it's something that I intend to get back into. And I'm excited to get caught up on because as I've stated before, time and again, and I will, I'm still a little bit upset that Peter Capaldi left the best on-screen adaptation of an Alexandre Dumas piece in The Musketeers and went to Doctor Who, but once I get there, maybe I'll be more forgiving. And then you have this to look forward to as well. So
I think you will be. I think it was pretty much a lifelong dream for him to actually play the Doctor, and
he was a
he plays the
perfect
character so well.
he was a perfect Cardinal Richelieu.
All right, Chris, that brings us to your nerd commendation, and I'm actually very excited to hear you talk about this one.
Listen, I had a kind of a confession to you yesterday. I think very fondly of our friendship. Um, and it has carried me through some dark days indeed, but nothing quite like Birdemic Shock and Terror. No, but in all seriousness, one of the things that I consider to be foundational of our friendship is before this show was even a twinkle in our eyes, is that sounded weird, but oh well. Is when MST3K came back on Netflix, you're like, you're watching this, right? And I'm like, what is this show? And so, like, the greatest nerd commendation of all time is MST3K. And as a result, Rifftrax. So much so that I have a brand new 50-inch television in my bedroom and the Pluto TV channel for either Rifftrax or MST3K is almost on 24/7 just for background noise, just for like meditation purposes. It just makes me happy. Um, and the greatest of those, in my opinion, I know that you will go up for, and my friends go up for Samurai Cop. But for me, the most enjoyable experience that I've had is the Rifftrax version of Birdemic Shock and Terror. Really, any James Wynn film, like salute to that absolute cinematic king. This movie was made on a budget of $10,000. Probably one of the most just shockingly bad films I've ever seen, but it's oh so enjoyable in the best possible way. It's absolutely like the CGI, the animation of these killer birds clearly inspired by Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, is just so hilariously bad, and some of the best zingers, one-liners. It rivals Sharknado 1 and 2 as well. Other great riff tracks. Honestly, just watch riff tracks and MS2 man. But Birdemic is my personal favorite, and it will have you in stitches. Sometimes I put on these channels so I can help me fall asleep. I can't fall asleep with this one on because I'm laughing too hard. So that's how good it is. There's a musical number where they're on a date in the midst of these killer birds attacking the Bay Area. But it's talking about hanging out with the family, and it's just it's pitch perfect. It's a perfect film in how awful it is. And I know this sounds like a weird recommendation and a weird endorsement, but just watch the riff tracks, Birdemic Shock and Terror.
Yeah, yeah. I don't actually have not seen this one, and I'm gonna put it on my list now. I
Oh,
love, I love Mystery Science Theater 3000, and I love Riff Tracks. And yes, to me, so far the peak of all of that whole culture has been Samurai Cop. I don't think I've ever laughed so hard in my life. It is just the perfect movie, and to me, it just goes to show that once again, it's one of those examples that a bad movie in the right way can be more entertaining than a good one, which is why I said that Madam Web was such a sin against humanity, because it's a bad movie that is bad in the worst possible way, and
I
that is
saw
just
I saw
boring.
one
It's
I saw one fan edit that changes my opinion on that. They added Linkin Park's "What I've Done" to that final scene with her in the sunglasses and in the wheelchair, and I'm here for it.
but yeah, Mystery Science Theater 3000 and Rifftrax in general, just taking ill-conceived movies and having some fun is literally like half of my childhood. My father and I used to turn down the volume on old Godzilla movies and make up our own dialogue for them. So I basically was riffing on movies as
It's
a child
so
already.
funny that you say that because I grew up broke as a joke as a kid. And so we would go to the mall when I was with my bio dad, and we would just narrate people's lives and like do the basically the same thing, but in live action. Um, but yeah, so um, I'm telling you, man, this one's the one. There's a point that I'm forgetting right now, but the sheer joy out of this film in particular, and any if you see James Wynn film, they have a couple that they've done on riff tracks in particular that are just pitch perfect.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to hit that one, man.
All right, that wraps another episode of the Nerd by Word. We thank you so much for sticking around through 191 episodes. If you like what you heard, please follow us, like, subscribe, whatever verbs need to take place on your favorite podcasting platform, uh, whether that is Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or nerdbyword.com.
And find us on social media and let us know what you think has to be included in any kind of nostalgic television show for this time period, or how you feel about our nerd commendations, or what your thoughts are on this week's nerd news. You can find us on all platforms, including, Twix, Twitter, X, whatever it's called this
Well,
week.
he's changed the URL this week, so I'm gonna have to find another way to go in the browser. I can't believe they got the
I
domain name for x.com and it wasn't. I'm just shocked.
Oh, now I have to get the bleep button ready. Anyways, that's all I got to say on that.
All right, stay well and stay nerdy.
The Nerd Byword is written and produced by Chris and Dave, two nerds with a love of all things pop culture. The podcast features music by Al Jimenez with additional drops composed by Joe Biondi. Our show art is by Ashery Design. Find us at nerdbyword.com and wherever podcasts are available.